You know, the ones you read late at night, shaking your head and thinking, damn, glad that's not me. But here I am, 22 years into a marriage that I thought was solid, only to watch it unravel before my eyes. Catherine and I met in college. She was the kind of woman who could light up a room with just a look. Smart, ambitious, and full of life. I fell hard and fast, and before I knew it, we were married. The early years were great. We traveled, built a life together, had the kind of love that made other couples jealous. But if I'm being honest, the last few years, they were different. At first, I chalked it up to stress. Work, life, getting older, it all takes a toll, right? Catherine started staying late at the office more often, always exhausted when she got home. Conversations became surface level, more about schedules and bills than anything real. Sex became rare, then non-existent. I told myself it was just a rough patch, that we'd find our way back to each other. But deep down, something felt off. It wasn't just the late nights. It was the way she looked at me, like I was furniture, just there. The way she suddenly guarded her phone like it held the nuclear codes. The way she laughed a little too hard at texts she refused to show me. I wanted to believe she was just overwhelmed, that maybe she was struggling with something she didn't want to talk about. But the truth? The truth was creeping in, whether I was ready for it or not. And then, one night, I got the proof I needed. It started with a feeling. You know the one, when your gut is screaming at you that something isn't right, but your heart begs you to ignore it. I spent months convincing myself I was paranoid, that the distance between us was just the natural ebb and flow of a long marriage. But the little things kept piling up, and eventually, they became impossible to ignore. Catherine's behavior had shifted so much that even our friends started noticing. She was always on her phone, smiling at messages she never shared. She'd started wearing perfume to work, something she hadn't done in years. And then there were the nights when she'd come home late, claiming last-minute deadlines or drinks with the girls, but she'd reek of cologne that wasn't mine. The final push came on a random Tuesday night. Catherine was in the shower, and her phone, for once, wasn't glued to her hand. It was sitting on the nightstand, screen glowing with a notification. I never wanted to be that guy, the one who snoops through his wife's phone. But when you've been married for 22 years, and the woman you love suddenly starts treating you like a stranger, you start making exceptions. I reached for it, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The message was from someone named Carl B. Can't stop thinking about earlier. You're incredible. My stomach dropped. My hands shook as I scrolled up. There it was, weeks, maybe months of messages. Late-night texts. Flirty exchanges. Plans to meet up. Explicit descriptions of things I hadn't done with my wife in years. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. This wasn't just some work friend or innocent conversation. This was an affair, in black and white, spelled out in words that made my skin crawl. I didn't even hear the water shut off. Catherine stepped out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, humming like nothing had changed. Like she hadn't just shattered everything we built together. I must have been pale, because she stopped mid-step, looking at me with a flicker of concern. "What's wrong?" she asked, voice casual but guarded. I held up the phone. Her face, God, I'll never forget the way her face changed. First, confusion. Then realization. Then something colder. Not guilt, not remorse. Annoyance. That's when I knew. She wasn't sorry she got caught. She was sorry it was inconvenient. I don't remember standing up, but suddenly, I was on my feet, Catherine's phone still in my hand. My heart was slamming against my ribs, my breath coming in short, shallow bursts. My entire body felt hot, like I had been doused in gasoline and someone had just struck a match. I held up the phone. "Who the hell is Carl?" Catherine didn't answer right away. She just stood there, wrapped in her towel, her wet hair dripping onto the carpet. For a split second, something flashed across her face, panic, maybe, but it was gone as quickly as it came. She crossed her arms over her chest, tilting her chin up. "You went through my phone." That was her first response. Not an explanation, not an apology, just an accusation. As if I was the one who had done something wrong. I let out a bitter laugh. "Yeah, and I found exactly what I was looking for." I scrolled through the messages, shoving the phone toward her. "Want to explain this?" She didn't even look at it. "You shouldn't have done that," she said, voice eerily calm. "That's a complete violation of my privacy." I felt something inside me snap. "A violation of your privacy? Are you fucking serious right now?" My voice was rising, but I didn't care. "You've been sneaking around, lying to my face, and I'm the one in the wrong." She let out a sigh, as if I was exhausting her. "Look, it's not what you think." I laughed again, but it came out strangled. "Oh. So you weren't fucking Carl Benson?" That got a reaction. Her eyes widened, just for a second, before she schooled her expression into something more neutral. "I never said that," she muttered. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "Then say it now. Say you weren't." Silence. That was all I needed. I nodded, swallowing against the lump in my throat. "Yeah. That's what I thought." She shifted her weight, rubbing her arms like she was suddenly cold. "It's not as simple as you think," she said quietly. I don't know how it happened." "You don't know how it happened?" My voice cracked on the last word. "You just tripped and landed on his dick." "Jesus, don't be disgusting." She wrinkled her nose, like I was the one making this ugly. "Things between us haven't been good for a long time, and you know it." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. "So that makes it okay?" "No," she admitted, finally looking me in the eye. "But it's not all my fault." And there it was. The blame shift. The justification. I had read about this, how cheaters try to rewrite history, how they paint themselves as the victim, how they act like they had no choice but to betray the person who trusted them most. "You should have talked to me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "If you were unhappy, if you felt like something was missing, you should have come to me." She exhaled sharply. "And then what?" "Huh. We'd go to therapy. Have a bunch of deep conversations about our feelings." I didn't want to fix things, I wanted to feel alive again. I stared at her, unblinking. "And you couldn't feel alive with me?" She didn't answer. And that hurt more than anything else. Silence filled the room, thick and suffocating. I could hear the faint drip of water from her hair hitting the carpet, the hum of the air conditioner, the distant sound of a car passing by outside. But between us? Nothing. She didn't answer my question. She didn't say no, of course I could feel alive with you. She didn't say it was a mistake. She didn't beg me to understand or fall apart in regret. Instead, she just stood there. Like a stranger. I felt something inside me shift, like a final thread snapping. I had spent months, hell, maybe years, convincing myself that whatever was wrong, we could fix it. That the distance, the coldness, the changes, they were all temporary. That one day, I'd wake up, and things would be like they used to be. But there was no coming back from this. "I need you to leave," I said finally. My voice was eerily calm, even though my hands were shaking. She frowned. "What? This is our house, I'm not going anywhere." I let out a hollow laugh. "You think I can sleep in the same bed as you after this? Pretend like I don't know what you've been doing. I can't even look at you right now." She rolled her eyes, grabbing a pair of pajama shorts from the dresser and pulling them on under her towel. "You're being dramatic." That did it. That single, dismissive sentence. Dramatic? My voice rose, my anger finally breaking free. "You've been fucking your boss behind my back, lying to me, making me feel like I'm crazy for noticing, and I'm the one being dramatic." Her jaw clenched. "You think I wanted this to happen? That I planned for this?" She threw her arms out. "I was lonely, okay? I felt invisible. You stopped trying, stopped caring, and Carl, he made me feel wanted again." I ran a hand through my hair, exhaling sharply. "So instead of talking to me, you jumped into bed with the first guy who gave you attention?" She crossed her arms. "You make it sound so simple." It is simple." My voice was steady, but my chest ached. "You made a choice, Catherine. You didn't just fall into this. You chose to lie, to sneak around, to betray me." She opened her mouth like she wanted to argue, but for the first time, she didn't have anything to say. I grabbed my keys from the nightstand, my head spinning. I needed air, space, anything but being trapped in this room with her. "I'm leaving." She scoffed. "Where are you gonna go?" "Anywhere but here." I turned and walked out, slamming the door behind me. I had no idea that was the last night I'd ever sleep in that bed. I didn't drive anywhere that night. I thought about getting in the car and just disappearing for a few hours, maybe checking into a cheap motel or sleeping in a parking lot. But I wasn't going to let her push me out of my own damn house. So, I went to the garage. It wasn't much. Just the usual clutter, boxes of old holiday decorations, some tools, a dusty workbench I hadn't touched in years. But it was quiet. It was mine. And most importantly, it was away from her. I grabbed an old blanket from a storage bin and threw it over the small couch I had shoved against the far wall. It wasn't comfortable, but it didn't matter. I wasn't really expecting to sleep. My mind was too busy replaying everything, every lie, every excuse, every late night where she said she was just tired. I should have known. Hell, maybe I did know. Maybe I just didn't want to see it. I sat there in the dark, gripping my phone, my thumb hovering over her messages. I wanted to scroll through them again, torture myself with every word she had sent to Carl. But what was the point? I had seen enough. I had seen more than enough. Instead, I opened our old texts, the ones from years ago, before all this. Back when she'd send me random "I love you" messages in the middle of the day, or pictures of stupid things that made her laugh. Back when she still cared. I stared at a message from our 10th anniversary. "I can't believe it's been 10 years already. I'd marry you 100 times over. You're my best friend, my home, my everything. I love you more than words can say." I clenched my jaw, my chest tightening. What a joke. At some point, exhaustion won out, and I must have dozed off. I woke up to the sound of the garage door creaking open. Catherine. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, silhouetted against the dim light from the house. "Are you seriously going to sleep out here?" I sat up, rubbing my face. "What do you want, Catherine?" She sighed, stepping inside. "I just think this is ridiculous. You're acting like a child. Can we just," she hesitated. "Can we just talk?" "Talk?" I let out a short laugh. "You mean like how we should have talked before you started fucking your boss?" She flinched. "Good. Let it hurt." "I know I messed up," she said, voice softer now. "But can we just, not do this? Not like this?" I stared at her. I wanted to scream at her, to make her feel even a fraction of what I was feeling. But I was too damn tired. "Go back inside, Catherine." Her lips parted like she was about to say something else, but then she just nodded. I watched as she turned and walked back into the house, leaving me alone in the garage, in the ruins of our marriage. I didn't sleep much that night. The garage was cold, the couch was lumpy, and my mind wouldn't shut the hell up. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Catherine's face, her blank expression when I confronted her, the way she barely even tried to fight for us. At some point, I must have drifted off, because I woke up to the early morning light slipping through the tiny garage window. My body ached, my head felt like it had been stomped on, and for a blissful half-second, I forgot what had happened. Then I saw her. Catherine was in the kitchen, visible through the small window. She was standing at the counter, making coffee like it was just another morning, like our entire marriage hadn't imploded the night before. Like I wasn't sleeping in the fucking garage. That's when it hit me, she wasn't going to fight for this. For me. For us. I sat up, running a hand down my face. I had spent the whole night cycling through emotions, rage, grief, disbelief, but in that moment, all I felt was clarity. This marriage was over. I had spent years giving her the benefit of the doubt, making excuses for the growing distance, convincing myself that things would get better if I just tried harder. But the truth was staring me in the face now, and it was ugly as hell. Catherine wasn't sorry. She wasn't heartbroken. She wasn't desperate to make things right. She was comfortable. She had built a separate life while keeping me as a backup plan, and now that I had caught her, she was just waiting to see what I'd do. Would I stay? Would I forgive her? Would I be weak enough to let her rewrite history? No. Not this time. I stood up, cracking my neck as I grabbed my phone. My hands weren't shaking anymore. My head wasn't spinning. I knew exactly what I needed to do. First, I called a divorce lawyer. Then, I called a locksmith. I sat in my car outside the house, fingers drumming against the steering wheel as the phone rang. My gut twisted as I waited for an answer, but I knew this was the right call. Law offices of Martin and Hewitt, how can I help you? I cleared my throat. Yeah, I need to speak with a divorce attorney. As soon as possible. The receptionist asked a few basic questions: my name, my spouse's name, how long we'd been married. My voice felt distant as I gave the answers, like I was watching myself from the outside. 22 years, and this is how it was ending. We have an opening for a consultation tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., she said. Book it, I replied without hesitation. One call down, one to go. I scrolled through my contacts and dialed the locksmith next. The guy answered on the third ring. Locksmith Services, how can I help you? I need the locks changed on my house, I said. Today. Are you the homeowner? Yes. Technically, we both were, but at this point, I didn't care. We can have someone out this afternoon. Do you need all exterior locks changed? Every damn one. After confirming the details, I hung up and let out a slow breath. That was it. The wheels were in motion. I wasn't giving Catherine time to talk her way out of this, to twist the narrative, to make me doubt what I already knew. She had made her choice, and now, I was making mine. When I stepped back inside, Catherine was sitting at the kitchen table with her coffee, scrolling on her phone like nothing had happened. She barely glanced up as I walked in. You sleep well in the garage? She asked, her tone dry. I ignored her and went straight to the bedroom, grabbing a duffel bag from the closet. If she thought I was just going to roll over and let this go, she had no idea who she was dealing with. She must have heard me tossing things into the bag because a few minutes later, she appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. What are you doing? I didn't even look at her. Packing. Packing for what? Her voice was still annoyingly casual, like this was some minor argument I'd get over in a day or two. I turned to face her, my jaw tight. For leaving. For moving out. For whatever the hell I need to do to get away from you. That got a reaction. Her expression faltered, just for a second. You don't have to do this, she said, softer now. I know you're upset, but we can. No, I cut her off. We can't. She swallowed, shifting on her feet. Can we at least talk about this? I let out a humorless laugh. Talk. You had plenty of time to talk, Catherine. But instead, you spent months sneaking around, lying to my face, and fucking Carl Benson in his office. Her face flushed. You don't have to say it like that. Why not? That's exactly what happened, isn't it? I zipped up the bag and slung it over my shoulder. I'll be back later for the rest of my stuff. Her eyes narrowed. Where are you even going? Not your problem. I brushed past her, my heart hammering as I walked toward the door. I had no idea where I was going to stay tonight. Maybe a friend's place, maybe a cheap motel. But I knew one thing for sure. I was never sleeping under the same roof as Catherine again. I didn't have a plan. I just drove. The second I pulled out of the driveway, I felt like I could finally breathe again. The house, our house, had become suffocating, filled with ghosts of a life I thought I had. Now, it was just a place where my wife had lied, where she had smiled at me after spending the night with someone else, where I had spent months being made to feel like a fool. I kept driving until my phone buzzed. A text. From Catherine. Catherine, where are you going? I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat without answering. She didn't deserve an answer. She had already made it clear she didn't give a damn about me, at least not until I was walking out the door. Eventually, I pulled into a cheap motel on the edge of town. It was the kind of place with flickering neon signs and a lobby that smelled faintly of burnt coffee and disappointment. Perfect. One night, I told the clerk. She barely looked up as she slid me a key. Checkout's at 11. The room was exactly what I expected: stale air, a scratchy comforter, a TV that probably hadn't worked since the early 2000s. But it didn't matter. For the first time in months, I wasn't sharing a space with Catherine. And that was enough. I dropped my bag onto the chair and sank onto the bed, staring at the ceiling. My whole body ached, not just from sleeping in the garage, but from the weight of everything. This was real. I had spent so long trying to ignore the cracks in our marriage, convincing myself that if I just tried harder, things would get better. That if I showed her more affection, planned more date nights, asked fewer questions, she'd come back to me. But that was a lie. She had already left, emotionally, physically, intimately. The only thing that had kept her around was the convenience. I was stability. Carl was excitement. And she wanted to have both. Not anymore. My phone buzzed again. Another message. Catherine, we need to talk about this. I exhaled sharply, fingers tightening around the phone. No, we didn't. For the first time in 22 years, I didn't owe her a damn thing. I turned off my phone and closed my eyes. Sleep didn't come easy, but when it did, it was the deepest I'd had in years. I woke up to the dull hum of traffic outside, the thin motel curtains doing little to block out the early morning sun. For a moment, I forgot where I was. I reached for the other side of the bed out of habit, but it was empty. Right. Catherine wasn't here. And she never would be again. I sat up, running a hand down my face. My mouth was dry, my body stiff from the shitty motel mattress, but there was a strange sense of lightness too. I had spent so long drowning in uncertainty, in maybe if I just try harder thoughts, that I hadn't realized how much energy I had wasted clinging to something that was already gone. I grabbed my phone off the nightstand and hesitated before turning it on. I already knew what I'd find. Sure enough, a string of texts from Catherine popped up the second the screen lit up. Catherine, we need to talk about this. Catherine, are you really going to ignore me? Catherine, you're being childish. Catherine, so this is how you want to handle things? Running away? Catherine, at least tell me what you're thinking. I didn't reply. She wanted to know what I was thinking. Fine. I was thinking about how I had spent years loving someone who threw me away the second something easier came along. I was thinking about how I had shared a home, a bed, a life with a woman who could look me in the eyes, tell me she loved me, and then turn around and fuck another man. I was thinking about how, despite all of that, she still expected me to sit down and talk like I owed her some kind of gentle closure. Fuck that. Instead of answering, I did what I should have done the moment I found out about Carl. I called my lawyer. Martin and Hewitt Law Offices, how can I help you? I have an appointment at 10, I said. Just confirming. Yes, we have you down with Mr. Hewitt. We'll see you soon. I hung up and took a long, steady breath. This was happening. This was really happening. By the time I checked out of the motel, I had already decided, I wasn't just going to roll over and let Catherine dictate how this played out. She had made her choices, and now, she would have to deal with the consequences. I wasn't her backup plan. I wasn't going to be some option she could hold on to while she figured out if Carl was worth the trouble. I was done. And for the first time since this nightmare started, I finally felt like I was the one in control. By the time I pulled into the parking lot of Martin and Hewitt, I had already decided, I wasn't walking out of that office without a clear plan. No more second guessing. No more looking for some version of this mess where Catherine and I worked things out. That ship had sailed the second she let another man touch her. I sat in the car for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. This was it. The beginning of the end. With a deep breath, I stepped inside the office. It was a quiet, professional space, beige walls, a few modern paintings that were probably supposed to be calming. The receptionist greeted me with a polite smile, then led me to a private room where my lawyer, Greg Hewitt, was waiting. He was in his mid-50s, sharp-eyed, with the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who had seen a lot of ugly divorces. Mr. Reynolds, he said, standing to shake my hand. I understand you're looking to move forward with divorce proceedings. I nodded as I sat down. Yeah. As fast as legally possible. He leaned back in his chair, clicking his pen. All right. Let's start with the basics. How long have you and your wife been married? 22 years. Any children? No. Shared assets? House, cars, joint bank accounts? I ran a hand through my hair. Yeah, we own a house together. 2 cars, but mine's in my name. Joint checking and savings. She makes decent money, but I earn more. Greg nodded, jotting down notes. Any prenuptial agreement? No. He paused, tapping his pen against the legal pad. And what's the cause of divorce? I exhaled sharply. Infidelity. His expression didn't change. Clearly, he'd heard that before. Do you have proof? I pulled out my phone and opened the screenshots I had taken of Catherine's messages with Carl. I slid the phone across the desk. Greg scrolled through them, his face unreadable. After a minute, he set the phone down and folded his hands. This is good. It proves infidelity, which could work in your favor when it comes to asset division and spousal support. Do you want to pursue an at-fault divorce? I hadn't even thought about that. What's the difference? No fault means you're dissolving the marriage due to irreconcilable differences. It's cleaner, faster, and usually requires minimal court involvement. At fault means we're specifically citing her infidelity, which could impact financial settlements and even alimony, assuming she tries to come after you for it. I clenched my jaw. Catherine might not need my money, but I wouldn't put it past her to try to milk this for everything she could. Go with at fault, I said firmly. Greg nodded. That's what I'd recommend. He made a few more notes before glancing back at me. One last thing, are you still living in the marital home? I left last night, I admitted. He frowned. You shouldn't have done that. She could try to argue that you abandoned the property, which could affect your claim to it. My stomach twisted. I didn't abandon it. I couldn't sleep there. I spent the night in a motel. That's understandable, he said. But you should go back as soon as possible, or at least take steps to secure your position. He paused. Do you want her out of the house? The question hit me harder than I expected. That house wasn't just walls and furniture, it was ours, filled with years of memories. But now, all I saw when I pictured it was her. Catherine, sneaking around. Catherine, lying to my face. Catherine, sleeping in the bed we shared after coming home from Carl. Yeah, I said. I want her out. Then we'll file a formal petition for exclusive occupancy. It may take time, but if we prove infidelity and can show cause, meaning it's a toxic environment for you, it's possible the court will side with you. I nodded, gripping the arms of my chair. And in the meantime? Change the locks, Greg said without hesitation. It's still your house. As long as there's no court order saying otherwise, you have every right to secure it. I almost smiled. Already scheduled. Greg smirked. Good. You're thinking ahead. That's what wins these cases. By the time I left the office, the weight in my chest had shifted. The pain was still there, but now, it had a purpose. A direction. Catherine had made her choices. Now, she was going to have to live with them. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the locksmith was already there, waiting by his van. A guy in his late 40s, dressed in a Navy work uniform, gave me a nod as I stepped out of my car. You Reynolds? He asked, pulling his toolbox from the back. Yeah, I said. You got everything you need? Yep. Shouldn't take long. Front door, back door, garage, anything else? That's it, I said. Make sure they're good locks. I don't want anyone getting in who shouldn't be. He smirked. I get it. You got a key for me to match, or you want a whole new set? New set. Full reset. He didn't ask questions, just got to work. I stood on the porch, arms crossed, watching as he removed the old locks and replaced them, one by one. The sound of the drill, the clink of metal, it was strangely satisfying. Like I was physically removing Catherine's hold on my life, one screw at a time. Halfway through, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and checked the screen. Catherine. I let it ring. Then a text popped up. Catherine, where are you? Then another. Catherine, we need to talk. You can't just ignore me forever. I exhaled through my nose, gripping the phone tighter. Oh, but I could. I turned off my phone and slipped it back into my pocket. Almost done, the locksmith said, giving the deadbolt a final turn. Want to test it out? I stepped forward, taking the new key he handed me. It slid into the lock smoothly, clicking into place. I turned it. Locked. Unlocked. Done. Perfect, I said. Thanks. No problem. He handed me 2 extra keys. Need any spares for family? I thought about it. Then shook my head. Nah. Just me. After he left, I stood on the porch for a moment, staring at the front door. My door. My house. Catherine didn't own me anymore. I walked inside, shutting the door behind me, locking it with a firm, satisfying click. I hadn't been back in the house for more than an hour when the inevitable happened. Catherine showed up. I heard her car before I saw it, the tires crunching against the driveway. A few seconds later, she was at the front door, jiggling the handle. Then came the knock. 3 sharp raps. Then another. Then silence. I sat on the couch, arms crossed, staring at the door. I could almost feel her confusion, her irritation. She tried the handle again. Then, right on cue, came the pounding. Are you fucking kidding me, Michael? Her voice was muffled but sharp, cutting through the door like a knife. I exhaled slowly, keeping my breathing steady. I had known this was coming. I had prepared for this. Open the damn door, she snapped. I stood up, walked over, and, without unlocking it, pulled it open just enough to look at her. She stood there, arms crossed, her face a mix of anger and disbelief. She wasn't in work clothes this time, just leggings and a sweatshirt, like she had rushed over without thinking. "What the hell is this?" she demanded, gesturing to the door. "I changed the locks," I said flatly. Her nostrils flared. "You changed the locks? On our house?" "My house," I corrected. "Or at least, it will be soon." She blinked, like she couldn't believe I had actually said it out loud. "You can't just do this, Michael. This is my home too." I leaned against the frame, arms crossed. "Not anymore." Her jaw clenched. "We haven't even discussed the divorce yet." "No need to discuss it. It's happening." Her eyes darted past me, scanning the house, like she expected to see something different inside. "You're being an asshole." "No, Catherine," I said, my voice calm. "I'm finally treating you the way you deserve." Her face twisted into something ugly. "You think this makes you look strong? Changing the locks like a coward? Running away instead of facing what happened?" I let out a slow, humorless laugh. "Facing what happened? I did face it, Catherine. When I sat in the garage all night, trying to process the fact that my wife of 22 years had been screwing her boss behind my back. When I packed my bags and left because I couldn't stand the sight of you. When I hired a lawyer and took steps to make sure I never have to deal with your bullshit again. That's me facing it." Her expression flickered, just for a second. Something like guilt. Maybe even regret. But she buried it just as fast. "You're going to regret this." "No, I really won't." She shook her head, taking a step back. "You think you're hurting me? You're just making it easier for me to move on." "Good," I said. "Then go." She scoffed, turning on her heel and marching back to her car. I watched as she got in, slammed the door shut, and sped out of the driveway. Only when her car disappeared down the street did I finally exhale. I had won the first battle. Now, I just had to win the war. Catherine was quiet for the next 2 days. No texts. No calls. No showing up at the house, banging on the door. It was almost too quiet. I knew her well enough to know this wasn't surrender, it was strategy. She wasn't the type to go down without a fight. She was probably trying to figure out her next move, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And sure enough, it came on the 3rd day. I was sitting at the kitchen table, eating takeout straight from the container, when my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something told me to answer. Michael Reynolds, a professional-sounding woman asked. "Yeah, who's this?" "This is Lisa Garrett from your wife's legal team." I let out a short laugh. "My wife's legal team? That was fast." "Mr. Reynolds, I'm reaching out to inform you that Catherine Reynolds has retained our services and is formally requesting access to the marital home. She has expressed concern about being locked out without prior notice and would like to come to an agreement regarding the division of assets." I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my jaw. "Yeah, that's not happening." Lisa sighed, clearly used to dealing with this kind of response. "I understand this is a difficult situation, but locking your spouse out of the home could be seen as a retaliatory action, which may not reflect well on your case." "She's not my spouse anymore," I said coolly. "And if she wants to see what doesn't reflect well on a case, she should look at her text messages with Carl Benson." There was a pause. "Are you pursuing an at-fault divorce on the grounds of infidelity?" "That's right." Another pause. "In that case, I'd advise you to reconsider a more cooperative approach to asset division. A drawn-out legal battle benefits no one. Tell Catherine she should have thought about that before she screwed her boss." Lisa exhaled through her nose. I'll relay your response. Expect formal filing soon. Looking forward to it. I hung up before she could say anything else. So, Catherine wanted to play hardball. Fine. She had no idea who she was dealing with. I knew Catherine wouldn't let this go easily. She never did. She wasn't the type to admit fault, and she damn sure wasn't going to let me walk away without trying to get something out of it. So, I decided to hit her where it hurt the most. Carl Benson. It wasn't enough that she had cheated on me with him, I wanted both of them to feel the consequences. I had already told my lawyer to proceed with the at-fault divorce, but that wasn't enough. I wanted Carl to suffer too. I spent the next few hours gathering everything I had, screenshots of her texts, records of her late-night meetings, and even old credit card statements where she had paid for hotel rooms under her name. Then, I made a call. To his company. I kept it simple, professional. Hello, I'd like to speak to HR regarding an employee's inappropriate workplace conduct. The woman on the other end sounded interested immediately. I didn't go into details over the phone, I just asked for an email where I could send proof. Once I got it, I attached everything. Every single piece of evidence showing that Carl Benson, a high-level executive, was engaging in an affair with a subordinate, my wife. I didn't even hesitate before hitting send. An hour later, Catherine called me. I answered just to hear the panic in her voice. "What the fuck did you do, Michael?" she hissed. I smiled. "I have no idea what you're talking about. Don't play dumb. Carl just got called into a meeting with HR. He thinks they're going to fire him." I leaned back on the couch, completely calm. "Sounds like a him problem." "You petty asshole," she snapped. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Yeah," I said. "I've done what I should have done the second I found out you were cheating." She inhaled sharply, like she was trying to keep from screaming. "You just ruined his career, Michael." "Good," I said. "Maybe now he'll have more time for you." Silence. For the first time, Catherine didn't have a snappy comeback. No insults. No blame shifting. Just silence. I didn't wait for her to find the words. "See you in court, Catherine," I said, and hung up. The war wasn't over. But I had definitely won this battle. Catherine didn't call me again after that. Not that day. Not the next. I kept an eye on the news, wondering if Carl Benson's name would pop up somewhere, but the company handled it quietly. Still, through some mutual acquaintances, I heard what I needed to hear: Carl had been fired. No severance. No graceful exit. Apparently, workplace affairs didn't sit well with the board. Couldn't have happened to a better guy. As for Catherine, she went silent after that last call. She must have realized there was nothing left to say. I had outmaneuvered her at every turn, and she knew it. The divorce proceedings moved forward. She fought at first, tried to go after the house, some of my assets, but the at-fault filing, paired with the evidence I had, shut that down fast. In the end, she got the car she drove and some savings from our joint account. That was it. No alimony. No claim to the house. Nothing else. She didn't even look at me during the final meeting with the lawyers. Just signed the papers with a tight jaw, then walked out like she couldn't get away fast enough. That was fine. I was done looking at her, too. The house felt different now. Lighter. I had made some changes, gotten rid of all the furniture Catherine had picked out, repainted the walls, even knocked down the wall between the kitchen and living room to open up the space. This was my home now. And my life. It was better than I ever expected. I started going out more, meeting new people. Some casual dates, some flings. Nothing serious at first. I needed time to figure out who I was outside of being Catherine's husband. But then, a few months ago, I met Elise. She was nothing like Catherine. She was honest, straightforward, and didn't play mind games. From the start, she made it clear that trust was everything to her. And after what I'd been through, that was exactly what I needed. Last week, she moved in. For the first time in years, I felt happy. Really happy. No tension. No suspicions. No waiting for the other shoe to drop. Just peace. And Catherine? The last I heard, she and Carl didn't last. Guess losing his job made him a little less exciting. Not my problem. I had one. And I had finally moved on.